in this section, let's try to understand line segment, line, intersecting lines, and rest of the concept. So the main thing you need to understand, even before line segment, there is something called as plane. So you need to understand what is a plane. So when you start off with understanding lines and angles, so you'll come across plane. So what is plane? Plane is a flat surface. So it's a flat surface. So for example, if I'm actually going to take a flat surface of a table, let's take table, or otherwise just a wall, or can be anything, any flat surface. So a plane has no boundary. So it's the surface, it's a flat surface, and it has no boundary, in the sense I can actually extend all four sides. So plane can go endlessly. So usually the word used is endlessly. So there is no end to that. So that's a plane. So these are the examples. Examples can be anything, even including books or any flat surface, even the flat surface of your mobile. So it is just a flat surface which has no boundary. So from there, let's come to the other concept, point. What is a point? So point is just a mark on the plane. So for example, if I am actually going to put a point on the wall, so it is just a point. What does it represent? It represents position. So remember this, when I say position, this actually has a very wide meaning. Point. Let me give you some examples. If I'm actually using GPS, what happens? If I'm actually using GPS actually has a point. So if you are somewhere in your location, that's a point which is your location. But what is it actually representing? It represents latitude, longitude. These two actually make up your location for GPS. That's a point. That's a point. That's a position of yourself on the GPS or the map. So let's, on the map, usually on the map. So let's take another example. If I'm actually trying to draw a graph, there are points here. What are these? These are just points, but there is a position for each one of them. So each position of this graph, that point, represents x and y values. X represents value of x and y represents value of y axis. So but this point is actually called as coordinate point. Just a different name, but still that point has a position. This point has a position. A point which you draw on a smooth surface on a paper represents a point. That is just the point. So from there, let's move on to line segment. If I am actually going to join 2 points, a straight line joined by 2 points represented alphabetically, capital caps, alphabetically. So this makes up a line segment. Line segment joined a line, 2 segments or 2 points joined are called as line segment. So the line, what is line? So if I extend the same line segment endlessly again on both sides, that's called line. So what was this? This is a segment. If you remember, that was a line segment. So segment is what? Is part or a piece. It's a part or piece of that line. So which is the longer one, or which is the bigger one here? Actually, line extends endlessly on both sides, whereas line segment is part of that line. So that's the reason what happens is when we mention line segment, most of the time we are actually mentioning line segments, unless and until if you are not going to write with arrows. Arrows are the ones which are extending on either side of the line. If not, if I am going to take only line segment, that will be my line segment. So 2 points and joined together, that's a segment which is the part or the piece of this entire line. So let's go on to intersecting lines. 2 lines are line segments. Whenever I'm mentioning about lines or line segments, you can think of either this or that. If not, unless it is mentioned with 2 points, that's a line segment, or otherwise that whole line is just a line. So two line segments are lines intersecting at one point. That is the point I'm talking about. That's a point. That's a point. So they are intersecting at one point. That's called as, these two lines are called as intersecting lines, or otherwise that point itself is called as point of intersection. Remember that. Intersection. There are certain things based on certain characteristics and properties you will learn based on intersecting lines, but just understand. So whenever I talk about any of these intersecting lines, all of them, they're all on a plane. So they're all on a plane. So the plane surface which we talked about, so they're all on plane. So what if I had two lines just like this, or two line segments? They are not intersecting anywhere. There is no point of intersection. They are not touching each other. They are not intersecting anywhere. So these two lines are not called as intersecting lines. They are just lines. They are just individual lines. So if they cross each other at one point, that is called as point of intersection. Let's move on to concurrent lines. So what are concurrent lines? Try to understand all of them, because although these are basics, but these words are repeatedly used in most of your questions, even 9th standard, 10th standard. So concept is not going to come back unless and until you understand, and you will be able to use the properties of all of this. So let's move on to concurrent lines. Three or more lines intersecting at one point. Three or more lines intersecting on one point. Why did I say three or more lines? If I take two lines, these are intersecting lines. So I need third line. So two already we know intersecting lines. Three or more lines. Sorry. Three or more lines. These are all called as concurrent lines. Again, it's the same description. They are all on the same plane, more than two lines intersecting at one point. Those are all called as concurrent lines. So it can be any number of lines. If someone asks how many lines can pass through a single point, it's infinity. Many number of lines can pass through, and those all lines are called as concurrent lines. Collinear points. So let's take what we understood until now. What we understood is, that's a line segment. That is a line segment. I had A and B. If there are three or more points lying on either a line or a line segment, those are called as collinear points. So let's take that, let's take that, let's take that. I cannot go with just 2 points, because 2 points make up a line segment. You should have at least 3 or more, exactly same as concurrent lines. 3 or more lines intersecting at one point. Here 3 or more points lying on the same line or line segment on the same plane are called as collinear points. Very important, because all lines lying on the same line, they are not going to give you any area. It is just a line. So remember this concept. This concept will be there for a long time. So collinear points. Let's also try to see how do we actually represent these ones. When you start off with all these things, you will certainly need to represent these particular lines. If I take AB as a line segment, I'll just write it as is, like that. AB as a line, not as a line segment, that will be line. So if it is a ray, we'll discuss about it. So these are the main things you need to remember. That represents line segment, that is just a line. Let's move on.